Thank you for joining us today for the panel presentation, United for Change, Broad-Based Support for Natural Climate Solutions in the United States. I'm Dan Brissett. I'm the president of the Environmental Study Institute. And together with our friends at US Nature for Climate, we pulled this panel session together. I'm really looking forward to it. It's a great topic. US Nature for Climate does great work surveying and understanding and analyzing and everything around public opinion for natural climate solutions. So we have a really great show. Nathan may say more about this later, but US Nature for Climate is a coalition of 29 organizations dedicated to advancing equitable implementation of natural climate solutions in the United States. They do great work. I encourage everyone to check them out. You can subscribe to their newsletter by using this QR code. And then on the left side of the screen, you can see all the organizations that make up US Nature for Climate. Environmental and Energy Studies, why are we here? Well, what we do is we're based in Washington, D.C., and our main line of business is putting together policymaker educational resources around climate tolerance. So these are our speakers. I'll introduce them as they come up, but we have a really great roster. I'd also like to just say thanks at the beginning of the panel to Francis with US Nature for Climate, Kevin with US Farmers and Ranchers in Action, and Brendan Shane with Trust for Public Lands for being part of this event as well. I'm looking forward to the discussion. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker of the day. That is Nathan Henry. Nathan is the director of US Nature for Climate and a great partner of ours at ESI. So welcome, Nathan, to the session.
Very excited to be here today. I'm Nathan Henry, and I've been with US Nature for Climate for about 5 years, and we're really excited to have 29 members to our coalition now who are all pushing to really speed up implementation of natural climate solutions in the United States. What I'd like to talk about today is some polling that we commissioned back in June this year that really highlights the broad-based and overwhelming support for natural climate solutions implementation in the United States. You know, we live in a very partisan and polarized age, so there are not a lot of issues out there that are capable of bringing people from both sides of the aisle together towards a common goal, and really happy that natural climate solutions really seems to be one of those rare issues these days. So we conducted a survey. It was a national survey of 1,000 registered voters in the United States, and conducted June 10th to 19th. We hired a bipartisan team of pollsters. So we had a Democratic pollster and a Republican pollster working together to do this survey. We also oversampled rural voters. So we had about 300 in our base sample, so we interviewed about 150 extra rural voters, just so we have a little bit more robust numbers there. And you'll notice that a few places in the survey we're actually tracking earlier polling that we've done as well, just so we can look at the trend in support. The first question we asked was just basic support for natural climate solutions.
We didn't just assume that everybody would know exactly what natural climate solutions are coming into the survey. So everybody heard a brief definition of natural climate solutions, noting that they're actions that reduce emissions and increase carbon storage in forests, farms, grasslands, and wetlands. We then gave a list of several examples of specific natural climate solutions on agricultural lands and in forests and coastal wetlands. You can see from the list here. And then noted that efforts to expand these practices can be supported by laws and public funding approved at the federal, state, and local levels. So what we asked in this survey was whether voters would support laws and public funding to approve, to fund these practices. As you can see here, voters overwhelmingly support laws and public funding to support natural climate solutions, with 94% supporting this proposal and only 6% opposing it. And support was nearly as strong in rural areas as well, with 93% support overall and only 7% in opposition. I think one thing that's especially noteworthy is the level of strong support. Over half of voters actually strongly support expansion of natural climate solutions implementation. So that's a very encouraging number. As you can see here, natural climate solutions garner overwhelming support across party lines as well, with Democrats almost unanimously supporting expanded implementation at 99%, and Republicans nearly as strong with 89% supporting expanded implementation of natural climate solutions, and independents right there in the middle. You can see strong support is also strong among Republicans, falling just short of that majority level, while nearly 7 in 10 Democrats strongly support expanded implementation. So this is a very unique issue in the political discourse these days, in that it is one that draws strong support across party, and even unique in the climate change discussion as well.
And I think also noteworthy is that support's growing. We've actually asked this question 3 times over the last 3 years. In 2022, we were at 86%. Now we're at 94%. So it's always a little nerve-wracking when you go into the survey and you already have 92% support, because there's a lot more room to go down than up. And so it's very excited that our numbers continue to improve. And I think especially noteworthy is the growth of strong support, where we've gone just in the last year from 47 to 55%, which means that we're converting champions. We're getting people excited about this issue, and people are going from being just sort of, supporters to actually people who are excited and enthusiastic about natural climate solutions. And especially noteworthy is the growth in strong support among Republicans. In 2022, we only had 29% of Republicans who supported this strongly. Now we're up to 46%. So that's a huge change in a very short amount of time. We did want to see how our kind of message fared against a little bit of scrutiny. So everybody heard sort of 2 arguments about natural climate solutions. Everybody heard this opposition argument. People who oppose investing in natural climate solutions say that budget deficits and inflation, the last thing we need to do is waste money on costly programs that won't solve problems impacting us today. And then we read sort of a counter argument from our side that really focuses on the many co-benefits of natural climate solutions, water quality, wildlife habitat, etc. And you can see here that when this argument was had, we overwhelmingly win this argument. 83% side with us, and about 17% say that they agree with the opposition more. And you can see that actually, since we asked a similar question in 2023, there was a little bit closer, 77 to 23%. Our margin has grown. Maybe it's because inflation sort of faded into the background a little bit, and people are feeling a little more positive about the economy. But again, a positive trend there. We also broke it down. So you're not going to have a bill in Congress that says, let's do natural climate solutions. It's usually going to be focused on specific strategies like wildfire management or coastal resilience, or providing technical assistance to farmers, for example. So what we did was we broke this down into a number of different sort of policy approaches that can help support natural climate solutions. And I'm not going to read through every single one of these, but some of them focus on restoring areas impacted by wildfire. Several items here focused on providing technical assistance or financial support and incentives to farmers and forest owners. There is a workforce element here. And you can see every single one of these items has over almost 90% support, and all of them are almost equally supported among Republicans and Democrats. So again, not a polarizing issue at all. And our second tier, our worst testing item in this survey was 85%. Again, 17 years as a pollster, I never had a survey that came back with numbers these positive. And I think what this kind of shows is that there's a broad menu of things that members in Congress can do if they want to support natural climate solutions policies. If you're living in an area that's, or representing an area that's a coastal district, and you want to focus on climate resilience, there's a strategy there. If you're representing a Midwestern farm state, and you want to help farmers in that state start to adopt sustainable agriculture practices, there's options there. So it really provides just a huge menu of different things that policymakers can do to move these strategies forward. The final question that I want to review is we asked voters if they would feel more or less favorably towards their member of Congress if they voted to keep funding for natural climate solutions. And you can see here that by a 69-6 margin, they would feel more favorably toward their member of Congress, and even among Republicans, that number is 60%. So I think what this kind of goes to show is, you don't have to just be a passive voter and supporter of these. This is something that, you can be very vocal about, and it's actually people in your district or the area you represent are probably going to feel pretty positive towards you if you are vocal and actually act as a champion on these policies. Oh, I do have one more slide.
So there's sort of this conventional wisdom in the United States that climate change writ large is a very polarizing issue. I think among policy elites that might be true. But if you look at the broader population, we asked the question, do you support or oppose the United States government taking action to reduce the carbon pollution that contributes to climate change? And overall, 85% said they do support action, 15% said they would oppose it. But even among Republicans, that's 74% want the US government to take action. So this is indicative a little bit of a disconnect perhaps between the population at large and maybe some of the policy elites. I think this, in my opinion, sort of acts like a permission slip that maybe it's okay to deviate from the orthodoxy a little bit, especially in natural climate solutions, which again, overwhelmingly is a very strongly supported strategy. So that's what I have, and now I'll turn things back over to Dan.
Thanks, Nathan.
Sure.
I think Congress should write a bill that just says, do natural climate. What does it go wrong post Chevron, right? Like, leave it to the agencies, just do it. Thank you, Nathan. That was a great presentation, and it is, at some point you'll hit 100%, and then I guess you'll just give that a
Then
rest.
we'll never pull again.
Yeah, never pull again, right, go out on top. Our second panelist today is Alex Murdoch. Alex is Senior Policy Advisor for Natural Climate Solutions at the Nature Conservancy. Alex, welcome to the lectern. I'll turn it over to you. Or that one.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm here to tell you about the actual bill. I'm a policy elite. I work with the Nature Conservancy. I'm a senior policy advisor, and I focus on natural solutions. And that means I talk to Congress about great ideas for how they can help conserve nature and be a part of making progress. That's what I think about every day. So what I'm going to talk to you about is a bill called the Replant Act. I'll tell you the story of how that came to be. The Replant Act is focused on reforestation of the National Forest System. But how many people here write policy? All right, this is safe. Wow. Okay. How many people here are scientists who do carbon modeling and sampling? All right, so this is a good map for the rest of us.
Want to know what everybody else does.
So this is a map of the reforestation opportunity in the United States. So reforestation is a really strong natural climate solution. If natural climate solutions can address 20% of the climate mitigation and challenge, forests and reforestation can address 5%. That's it. We have 148 billion acres across the country in all different types of land ownerships. So this is national forests, state forests, private lands. It's in Central Park. We have a lot of space where we can put trees back on the landscape. And this is original research from the Nature Conservancy, and it's online at the Reforestation Hub, which is a project between American Forests and Nature. So you can go and find this. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is a subset of that opportunity. And this is how you make lemonade out of lemons. This is the National Forest reforestation opportunity. These are the lands that the U.S. Forest Service manages. And the little blue pixels that you see there, unfortunately, are places where an adverse event has happened. You've got the deforested landscape from wildfire, pest disease, or timber harvest that hasn't been planted. And they are sitting there. And when I was at American Forest in 2018, we had this research, and my colleague Eric Spray showed me this map. And he said, so Forest Service is falling behind in reforesting these acres. And that's a big deal because a lot of people get their drinking water off these acres. A lot of people have their jobs in these areas. Communities depend on the function of these forests. And Congress had a way to pay for this back in the 20th century. They created a trust fund, and the trust fund was supposed to pay for it. Well, that was in the 20th century, so it didn't have enough money in it, and the Forest Service was falling for a long time. So he looks at me and he's like, all right, so can we fix this? I had no idea. This trust fund I'd never heard of before. Nobody knew how it worked. And we had to do a lot of research to figure it out. Thankfully, we figured something out. And what we figured out was a way to increase the amount of money the Forest Service had in this trust fund by over $100 million a year without charging a cost to the taxpayer. We can talk about that another time. But it was a fiscally responsible way, very responsible, it was free, way of fixing this problem. And when we're talking about natural climate solutions in a bipartisan space, that's one of the key elements. Can we do something in a way that the federal government plays an important role, but isn't just throwing all their money at it and hoping it will. So in this bill, the proposal we came up with, it was fiscally responsible. We made sure that the reforestation that would be done in the future was ecologically responsible. We wanted to make sure there was agency accountability, which is another important bipartisan element. And we wanted to prioritize action, and we wanted to make sure we struck a balance between benefiting people and nature. So we did all of those things in concert with three members of Congress who were the sponsors initially: Senator Udall, Senator Stabenow, and Senator Portman. And after we came up with this fabulous idea, they said, all right, well, now can you go and take it to stakeholders and see what they think? So we did. We went to a very broad group of stakeholders. We went to Evangelical Environmental Network. We went to National Wildlife Federation. We went to state foresters. And we said, what do you think? And they said, well, we've got some ideas. And so we incorporated those ideas and the result. We made it stronger, and we now had a very big tent of supporters. So that meant that we were ready for time. So in December of 2019, the Reforestation Act of 2019 was introduced. Not the Replant Act, but the Reforestation Act. And eventually it was renamed. And after several years, 2020 spent broadening our incentive support, getting a lot more members of Congress engaged, getting the president to endorse it, and Speaker of the House. We were in a really strong position, and Congress started talking about the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. And we said, hey, hold on a second. Trees are infrastructure. Reforestation creates jobs. And we were able to get the bill into that package, which, as you all know, passed with bipartisan support. So that's a story of how you go from a great idea, I don't know how to do, turn it into something. And it's a real blueprint. And it's the beginning of a way to get at reforestation opportunities in the US. This is the picture that we're looking at now. We're staring at over 100 million acres of private lands that could be responsibly reforested in the US. And so the question we're asking in the policy space is, how can we incentivize private lands? How can we put something together that's a bipartisan? And we do have a lot of credit work behind it that we can say it's possible. Because these numbers look awfully happy. Nathan's numbers look pretty happy. The replant numbers look pretty happy. But we do have a blueprint that does follow. If we succeed, we'll make a really big difference for the climate and science.
Does the replant stand for anything? Sometimes Congress comes up with one acronym. I say Patriot Act. Does replant stand for anything?
Yes, it's like restoring trees by planting.
Okay. Don't expect the quotes from our panel, but if you go to congress.gov.
No, there are brilliant people who do this. There really are. And they're like, oh, okay, good for you. We can call it that.
I think a lot of times they find the acronym first and work backwards. Like they want to call it this.
Obviously,
Yeah.
boring policy people came up with the Reforestation Act.
It's great. That is a great story, and I'm sure we'll get back to some of those points in the Q&A. That will bring up our third panelist. Michael Pinion chairs U.S. Farmers and Ranchers in Action and is the managing partner of Ash Grove Dairy Farm. Michael, it's really great to meet you today. I'll welcome you up here for your presentation.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here. Like Michael Kringen, dairy farmer from South Dakota. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not originally. Tell people I'm from the eastern side, just far east. So yeah, 20 years ago, my wife Patricia and our 3 daughters moved to South Dakota to expand our dairy enterprise. We're now in partnership with another family in Ashgrove Dairy. And through the dairy, I've been involved with Edge Dairy Cooperative, which is the third largest dairy cooperative now in the US. On the board since 2018, and through Edge, I'm on the board, and then this year I became chair of US Farmers and Ranchers in Action. And our whole thing of USFRA is how do we all work together to build a more sustainable environment? One of the things that we'll be talking about tomorrow, we've got a virtual seminar where we're talking about possibilities of agriculture becoming a possibility of being carbon sink. And so I do, you know, it's great for, it's so often, sorry, for farmers and everybody to talk in silos at times. But it's how do we all work together? How do we, it's by working together that we can make a positive change to the environment. And I'm glad to see that a lot of people are now realizing that agriculture can be part of the solution. In sustainability, I've noticed sometimes policies come out but don't include the farmer. And you know, Alex, you talked about all the private lands, it's farmer owned. And something that could work at policy mightn't work at the farm level. And we have to be conscious of that. And it needs to be farmer led. Edge Dairy Cooperative and FSF, which is Farmers for Sustainable Food, have worked very closely with USFRA for the last number of years. But by doing programs that are farmer led, we've over the last 5 years seen 31% reduction in nitrogen leachate, 61% reduction in phosphorus leachate, and a 53% reduction in sediment getting into rivers and streams. And that has to be found. Has to be incentive, because you have to remember best way, you know, we're farming to be sustainable, they have to be financially sustainable first. And farmers are the ones that mow their land. And what works in Missouri won't work in South Dakota, might necessarily work in South Dakota, or possibly doesn't work in North Dakota. So we have to let the farmers do it. And what we've seen in some of the programs, to get farmers involved, it has to be, you have to talk, you know, they have to be invited to join a program like that. But then when it's year 2 and year 3 into it, they're coming back and say, well, what if I try this practice? How will this help? And once they've been in it 3 or 4 years, they're finding they're getting the same production, but they're lowering their costs. So, which is very financially advantageous to them as well. So yeah, and there's a lot of good opportunities. So, and I know some questions. I'm more comfortable answering questions than we have here, so I apologize. But and after if people want to talk to me, they'll.
Michael, if you want to the next slide one,
Yeah.
there's a QR code with your information. There you go.
That was it. Sorry. So yeah, this is our event tomorrow. So if anybody wants to feel right, and it's a NASA report that they'll be talking about, and yeah, we've been working on it here for about 1.5 years, and there's some really interesting information coming out. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. I'm a Vermonter. I did not grow up here. My wife is also a Vermonter. Did grow up here. And I know that it's hard to get away because those cows need to be milked. So, Michael, thank you for coming all the way out here from South Dakota. I'm sure your cows miss
Yeah.
You'll see them on Wednesday.
I will do that.
Great, thank you. Our fourth panelist today is Hillary Franz. Hillary is Commissioner of Public Lands for the state of Washington. And she told me this while we were talking, so I'm going to say it. Ladies and gentlemen, Hillary Franz for Public Lands.
There you go. When I was, I'm an elected position. In 2016, I ran, and the joke is that nobody could pronounce my name. Is it Franz or Franz? Is it Franz or Franz? It was Franz. This tells you how bad I am. And then my 11-year-old son said, "It's easy on everyone, Hillary. It's Hillary Franz for Public Lands. It rhymes." So out of the mouth of babes, marketing happens, politics, polls, and everything else. So it is a great honor to be here. I am the Commissioner of Public Lands from Washington State. There are only 5 Commissioner of Public Lands in the country. I would say we're like very few, and most people don't know what we do. I'm going to just say right up front, it is not Parks and Rec. I do not have the luxury to be Leslie. I would leave that down any day. But I lead the Department of Natural Resources of Washington State and basically 6 agencies. So first, I manage about 3 million acres of aquatic land. So think the entire coast of Washington State and all your rivers, lakes, and streams. And our job is a proprietary one. We generate revenue from those aquatic lands, everything from ports and marinas to the Ferris wheel you all know in Seattle, to actual shellfish growers. We are the largest booby duck producer in the nation. China's #1 aphrodisiac to make $30 million off that. Trust me. Yes. There's a joke there in the state. But we generate revenue, but we also create critical jobs in our most rural communities in that area. And climate change is obviously having a huge impact on our ability to manage through those lands and also generate revenue, everything from increasing sea level rise to ocean acidification that is decimating our kelp and eelgrass beds, our submerged forests. I also manage and steward 1 million acres of agricultural land. So we are the largest wheat producer. We're not stealing from the dairies, but we have about 75% of our ag land is in grazing. And then we are the largest wheat producer, becoming one of the largest vineyard and orchard producers, high value, low value crops. Obviously critical for feeding our population. It also funds about $100 million a year for our schools, our libraries, health, housing, human services. We are critical to the community, and we are being significantly impacted by drought. When it comes, we're now seeing dust storms. My grandparents came from South Dakota. They escaped in the Great Depression, the black blizzards. Never thought I'd see dust storms in Washington State. It is the rainy state, but we are now seeing it in many parts of our state. I also manage and steward 2 million acres of forest land, everything from the most eastern border of our state to the most western border. We are the evergreen state. We are known for those forests. We provide the critical wood for our built environment. We generate about $300 million, again, for schools and communities, and some communities were 40% of their entire operating budget. And we are obviously seeing the impacts of climate change. Thank you for that map. It definitely doesn't make me feel so good when we're in dark blue. That's usually not the case, but I will say on that map, we are seeing increasing die-off of our forests, everything from drought, disease, insect infestation, increasing catastrophic wildfires. I also lead the wildfire fighting for the state of Washington, which has now become almost a 365-day of years. We see more geography impacted by wildfires. Last year we had more fires west of the Cascades, which is the wetter side of our state, than the east side for the first time in recorded history. And then we're obviously just seeing also more increasing floods, which I've now become responding to, as well as landslides. And it's interesting, the Washington state is very much a divided state, not just divided by mountains, but divided politically. It is very much representative, frankly, of the larger country and our division. And I'll say that for the past 8 years, I've led this work across our state in every corner and community, the rural and urban, east and west, liberal and conservative. And at a time of really deep national division, when I think the schisms between race and class, geography and ideologies just seem to be getting wider and wider. We have found a way in Washington state to bridge those divides to achieve real climate action. And I truly believe the way forward to actually bringing people together in this divided country is around natural climate solutions. Now, our state and our nation, and Washington State, having probably experienced the most, has had longstanding division on the environment. And it's often because environmental laws and protections have come at the cost of jobs. They've come at the cost of economic opportunity and community stability. When I talked about parts of our counties where we're 40% of their operating budget, we used to be 80%, right? Before the spotted owl, which if anybody's heard of, right? When that law came down overnight, we went from 80% of communities' operating budget to 40%. There was no backfill. So there's huge disparities, but there's also huge anger and history behind that. But we're proving that climate solutions, natural ones, will not only protect the lives of those in the rural areas, but also their livelihoods. And that's the key piece that I think we have to do. And I'll give you some examples. 7 years ago, we were on the heels of 3 years of catastrophic wildfires, where I think for the first time, Washington State woke up to really realizing that what we'd seen in California for the past decade had now very much moved north, and Washington State was not free from those risks. We had about 3 million acres of federal, state, tribal, and private lands, forest lands that were dying, and we're at significant risk of these catastrophic fires, with 1 million acres burning just in 2015 alone. I came on in 2017 in this role, and we immediately developed a forest health plan, the first one our state had ever seen, where we were going to restore 1.25 million acres of forest over 20 years. That's on federal, state, tribal, and private land. We're going to be agnostic to for the disease, and so the property lines, just because wildfire and disease is obviously agnostic to it. And when we set that goal, we brought stakeholders together that had never sat in a room for the last 20 years because they hated each other. Everyone from the environment community to the timber and the milling industry and everyone in between to be part of this solution and the development and implementation. By moving, the great thing about this is when we developed this plan, we sent a message to the marketplace that we're going to have a lot of small diameter trees. We're going to have a lot of slash piles. We're going to have a lot of waste material, and we're going to need a workforce one to do that work, but then we're also going to need new industries that will take that product and turn it into something good. And the great thing is within a year and a half, 2 of the largest cross-laminate timber mass timber facilities opened up, 2 of the largest in the country opened up in Washington State. Within a year and a half of us saying, here's our goal, and we're going to get to work doing it. We didn't even have money yet to do it, just so you know, but we sent a clear commitment to it from a broad group of stakeholders. We are now 7 years in. We are halfway to our goal. We will achieve our 20-year goal in 10 years. And we are now moving over to the west side of the state as we see increasing fires over there. And the great thing that's happened from this is not only do we now have more sustainable wood product in the area of cross-laminated timber, mass timber, but we're also seeing new sectors and industries, and the Inflation Reduction Act has definitely helped in this area with new kinds of investments that help pencil it out in the beginning. For example, biochar, which is one of those, you know, when I said we got to double down and achieve our forest health plan in half the time, all of my team said you're going to burn the state down single-handedly. Because those slash PLs are larger than this. They're quite large, and all it takes is a lightning strike or some human to come in and interfere, and we've got our own massive bonfire, large fire. And I said, well, let's go find the industries. And so this year, Breaking Ground is our new first ever biochar facility. Got $40 million from the Inflation Reduction Act, coupled with investors. We're doing the supply agreements. They're guaranteed that wood supply. And it's creating hundreds of jobs in a rural community that's been decimated. We're also seeing work within the conservation space where we're the evergreen state, and for the first time in state history, starting in 2020, less than half the state is forested. With increasing growing population and also more and more people moving out with COVID out into the rural areas, we're seeing the conversion of our working forest lands into housing development and other uses. Through the Inflation Reduction Act and our own climate commitment goals, we are now have literally over the last 2 years alone, we're in the process of buying about 100,000 acres of forest land. And we're also have been able to start to accelerate the reforestation on lands that had burned or had unfortunately laid fallow and had not been forested. The great thing is all of this is happening, and the jobs and the economic opportunity are coming to communities that have had 7 to 12% unemployment, that for too long have really felt like environmental regulations and climate actions are more like sledgehammers than actual tools that are going to help those rural communities. I often say one of the biggest challenges we have in this country, and it's true in our state, that is really, and especially since we're in an election year, we have right now a growing schism that is occurring between urban consumers and rural producers. The producers of our food, our wood, our water, our energy. We truly depend on each other because the producers would not have any opportunity economically but for the urban consumers. And the urban consumer, trust me, I raised 3 boys on a farm, so they knew how to actually butcher something if they got hungry. And but the reality is most people wouldn't know how to actually grow their food, find their water, kill their food if they needed to, right? And the more that divide happens, the more we see a polarization, and the more we are actually harming our planet and our climate. And the sooner we start to see our dependency, everything from the economic to the environment to the social, the sooner we'll be able to get natural climate solutions in place, save this planet, but also save our people and save our politics. Thank you. They're very happy. From her family, very different. I'm not touching his house, I promise.
That was great. Thank you very much. I'm going to transition up to the Q&A, and I'm going to Nathan. Thank you very much for our panelists will share that. To kick us off, Hillary, I'm going to refer to something that you mentioned. Talk about a room full of people who hated each other, or maybe who just weren't used to talking to each other. And so the first question I'd like to pose to the panel, maybe Nathan, I can start with you, and we can move our way down through the line. But how have natural climate solutions, and what is it about natural climate solutions that tends to bring together a diverse coalition? What is it that so many people from different perspectives identify? And how are natural climate solutions capable of generating or having common interests found by people who otherwise might not want to be in the same room at the same time?
Sure. Well, I think a big part of it is that most natural climate solutions aren't just natural climate solutions. They're also natural water quality solutions, natural job solutions, and natural coastal resilience solutions. Just about every single thing that we're advocating to help either reduce carbon emissions or to sequester carbon has a whole bevy of other co-benefits. And so you don't necessarily need to be a true believer in taking climate action to suddenly find a rationale for supporting some of the things that actually have climate mitigation benefits. You know, you go to the, we did a briefing earlier this year for the staff of the Climate Solutions Caucus in Congress, House. If you take a look at that webpage and look at the members, you'll see some people there that you would never have thought would associate their name with anything to do with climate. And it's because they realize, well, I represent a coastal district and there's more and more hurricanes coming. We need to figure out how to make our coastal communities more resilient. One of the projects we featured on our website, it's called the Lightning Point Shoreline Restoration Project in Bayou La Batre, Alabama, made famous by Forrest Gump. But this town, and you know, it's a red state, and it's a red part of a red state, and they are very proud of this Lightning Point project. It built out their coastal wetlands, you know, sequestering carbon even as we speak. But there have been 5 named storms that have hit that community since then, and it's been tangibly shown that the work that they did to restore their coastline has had a huge benefit in protecting the community from potentially pretty catastrophic damage. So I think that's a big part of it is you don't need to be a true believer. You can come to your own pathway for why you're supporting these strategies. But there's so many things that you can grab onto to want to do this that it makes it easy. And I think that's why we have that 94% number. People are more and more realizing that.
Alex, same question to you. You mentioned Senator Udall, Senator Stabenow, and Senator Portman, senators who represented different places, all very pragmatic senators, but they represented different places. What was it about the Replant Act that encouraged those members to come together and find solutions?
I think it was both the combination of policy elements. So there have been a lot of proposals out there that are much more expensive than what we were talking about. And it's very hard to sell when you've got zero money on the table and all sorts of things. So that's one piece. I think there is a commitment in the country to steward our lands, and there is an expectation that Congress is responsible for the lands that we own, and that we do actually have a duty to future generations. So that was something that really cuts across all walks and all coasts. But I also wanted to add that kind of beyond the Replant Act, one of the things that these policies do is they solve real problems. So you can solve for climate and for the flooding that's on the back half of your property by planting trees. So these are, we can take it from the problem of the commons to solve the problem, like Hillary was saying, and you know, the problem of the farm or the forest or the small community. And that's where you really get a lot of traction. We can do both in a very useful.
One thing about the senators, in a few months, they'll all be former senators. Senator Stabenow retiring. So we'll have more work to do to go to the Hill to find new champions to take their places and, you know, set the stage for the next generation of these policies, right? Yeah, no small task. No small task, but that's not what we're here. Michael, you represent, and you come from a community where, you know, you talked about it in your remarks. How do you bring farmers to the table? Or from a farmer perspective, what is it about natural climate solutions that encourages you all to come to the table and have discussions with people who you otherwise might not always see?
Yeah, well, one of the groups that we work with is USFRA, is Farmers for Sustainable Food, and they're headquartered in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And they brought together Edge Dairy Cooperative, but also Clean Wisconsin and the Nature Conservancy. And it was, you know, as you talk about at each other's throats at times, you know, how do we get them together? But now they're all working together. They're able to get the reduction to NP and sediment reduction, but they all, and what they found, like as Nathan was talking about, they went in for different reasons. You know, like Clean Wisconsin was they wanted cleaner waters in the state of Wisconsin. The crop farmers that went in, the only reason they went in was because they were asked by their neighbors that were dairy farmers, hey, can you help us work this? As they were in it a number of years, they saw that they were reducing their input costs. And they were coming up with ways of how to make their land more productive, so they could still get good yields, sometimes even improving their yields while reducing costs. So it's everybody can come in with a different point of view, but by us all working together, that's how we make it work. And this is not it's not a small project. Like in the last, I think it's just over 6 years. They're now, 280,000 acres and just over 300,000 animals are involved. So, and this is something that can be scaled up into other parts of the country as well.
And Hillary, I used your comment to kind of tee up the question, but as someone in a position of elected leadership, how do you foster that discussion? What is it? How do you approach just constituencies with divergent opinions? How do you bring them together to have constructive conversations about decisions?
Yeah, well, I mean, let me start. I think, and I'll be honest, when I stepped in this role, I'm a Democrat. I was elected by one county in the entire state, and nobody knew me, right? So most of all of rural Washington hated me without even knowing me, and I don't blame them, honestly, right? They're on the heels. They almost lost everything in fires. 3 firefighters' lives were lost. And they're like, look at her resume. Does she have firefighting? My kids tell you I couldn't even put out a kitchen fire. So to let alone to try to, right? And it was clear, though, the number one thing I could not fail at, which is wildfire response and restoring the health of forests, not only for the environmental reasons, but actually just for saving lives of firefighters, lives of the communities. And so I did what any really good human being would be, is I didn't have the righteousness that says I have all the answers or I'm gonna pretend that I do. And I actually went into communities that didn't elect me, that said, I'll let you talk and then I'll kill you. Literally, they did say that. It is a wild west out there still. And I just listened. I went and saw the devastation of the fires in 2014 through 2016. I saw the homes that burned down. I saw the rangeland and the forest land. And then I saw work that was happening to restore the forest with my own eyes, where it literally stopped a fire just from that restoration work. And I said, I listened, I learned, and I said, I will not fail you. I will work tirelessly until we solve this problem. That by itself, just showing up and not saying I have all the answers if you just do what I think should happen, but instead help me learn so I can lead, was the first piece. I think the second thing that has helped create this sense of urgency, and I don't recommend this for anybody, but the sense of urgency is that it really is about lives. In Washington State or in California, many states, it is about lives. We're no longer talking about something out in the future. It is literally every single year for 9 months of the year, the threat of fire, right? And when it comes down to that context of lives, everybody's paying attention. And I will say, for the most part, the people whose lives are most at risk, or livelihoods where you've got everything they've invested in 4 generations of farming or forestry is lost. And that helps them say, we got to solve this, and we need leaders who will solve this, to actually raise the profile of the issue and then raise people coming together to try to solve it. It is still not perfect and all roses, but I think where we're making progress of success is where it actually is felt firsthand, and it's people who understand the land, they've lived on it, they want it to work, they need it to work, and then being able to listen, learn, and then.
Great, thank you. We have a microphone to move around the audience. If anyone has any questions, it's over here by my friend Francis. Any questions from our group today? We'd like to, we have about 10 minutes or so left in our session, maybe a little bit more. And so if folks have questions and prompts for discussion, we'd be happy to hear. So Francis, you can wait at the back of the room.
Hey everyone, thanks for taking some time and sharing your insights. I'm terribly sorry I forgot the first speaker with the former polar. I just wanted to ask, I think you touched on this briefly in some ways, but to just go into it a little bit further, you talked about how, broadly in the US, climate change is still a fairly contentious issue. However, you have fairly overwhelming evidence that shows the opposite. Could you just tease that out? How do those two realities exist simultaneously? Where do they overlap, and where does maybe some understandings fall apart?
Well, I think the first thing is, I want to make clear, we're not trying to cover up and present this as something that's not a climate solution. An easy way to avoid controversy and polarization of climate is not to talk about climate. And I'll be honest, when I started working in this role about 5 years ago, you had a lot of people who say, you can't talk about climate change with farmers because they're just going to shut down. And so I think, and this wasn't the whole survey. We do a lot of research also on messaging. And one of the things that we really kind of stress is you don't just need to go in and say, we want you to plant more trees because of climate. We have this whole other list of other benefits, and we always put climate mitigation in a list with other items that I think touches things, issues of concern outside of climate as well, that tend to bring more bipartisan coalitions together. So on issues like wildfire doesn't care if you're a red state or a blue state, it's going to burn your communities no matter what. And so that's an issue where I think, because of the practical benefits of wildfire management communities, we're able to bring people together. And I think that's really what it comes down to is natural climate solutions puts us in a space where we can talk about tangible benefits for communities. It doesn't really matter what kind of community you are. And so it kind of takes it out of that knee-jerk, contentious, partisan space where a lot of climate change debate happens, and puts it into a space where I think there is much more willingness to to work together to get things done. So I think that's a huge part of it. It just makes our job a lot easier to message around this because we can just point to so many tangible positive benefits. And we can point to conservatives who are willing to talk about those benefits in language that frankly would probably resonate better with other conservatives. So I think that's a huge help as well. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thanks very much. Alex or Michael or Hillary, do you have any comments you'd like to add in response to the question?
One comment I would have is that I know that there was a farmer meeting, you talked about contentious, and you don't, a lot of times people don't mention climate at farming meetings, but I know earlier this year there was a sizable meeting happening and looking at some climate change, and there was people saying, oh, we can't be doing doing all these climate practices, and there was one sizable crop farmer stood up. He says, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't doing my climate practices because that's what's keeping me financially sustainable. And it was, so the message is getting out there, but we have to keep working at it. And it's how it can't be just from the media. It has to be one-on-one. You have to ask people and encourage them, and they start seeing their neighbors doing the practices. And first of all, they're a bit crazy, but then they start seeing that it's getting better every year. Then it's amazing how we used to see it with our dairy farm. People, when we built our first dairy farm, crop farmers says, oh, we don't want manure from dairy cows, that you won't build up carbon in the ground or anything like that. And it was only 5-6 years later when the fields that were getting manure every year, there were consistently 20-30 bushels an acre more in corn, 50 bushels more in soybeans, and going, oh, now it's got to the case we have a list of people looking for our dairy manure because they see the benefits of it. So
I'll add, I think when there's real engagement of the people who are actually managing and stewarding lands, whether it's our farmers or our foresters or even our shellfish growers, and because when they're on the land, they feel a strong sense that they know that land year after year, generation after generation. And what I think has been disturbing for them historically is when people from outside, oftentimes from the city or from, the capital, whether it's the country's capital or state capital, saying, we know what's best. You need to listen to how we do it. And it's incredibly off-putting and shows not a sense of respect and reverence for those who have been managing and stewarding truly with the dirt in their fingernails. But instead, when it comes to help us understand what your problem is, and we want to be part of the solution, and there's an engagement, a true engagement that includes the science and the practical, is where that transformation happens.
It helps when they can say, holy crap, look at all this corn. Look at all this extra soybeans.
That is true. That is true.
We have a question over here on the side.
Yes, for Commissioner Franz, really helpful remarks that you gave, and so thank you for that. And I think just the progress that you made in terms of the 1.25 million restoration goal has been tremendous. I'm curious what fraction of that is the kind of small diameter timber restoration focused work, and what are the one or two biggest obstacles you have to overcome before you hit the pace that you're on now to achieve it in less than half the time?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, first, great question. So first I would say, let me say how we did it. One, we took after we developed the plan, we then went and actually assessed the lands. We now have assessed over 3 million acres of literally watershed by watershed. What is the forest restoration that needs to happen? And we didn't do it just on state land, we did it all lands. And the specific treatment that needs to happen. And a lot of it is, I'd say almost all of it is actual thinning, right? I mean, we have places where we should be at 28 trees per acre, and it's around 150 trees per acre. And part of what we're trying to do is get there before nature does and burn it, because we then have too much carbon emissions, but we also lose unbelievable fishing and wildlife habitat and other values there. And then I'd say the hardest part, it really was that sense we didn't have the workforce So we now are the largest federal program in the nation in Washington. I had one person when I stepped in this role to do Forest Health. It's a policy person for those policy folks. And we are now the largest federal program in the nation that does work on federal lands. And also one of the larger state ones. And so, but it took time to get there. We weren't certain of any money, so we created a revolving loan fund. So we actually, as each project, we fortunately have foresters who know how to set up a project that gets pure environmental benefits, but can still make money off of it. And so that has now funded a state revolving loan fund and a federal revolving loan fund. So if the Inflation Reduction Act can come into being or whatever, we were still just fine in getting that work out. And that has enabled us to go from this sort of ratchet to a flywheel effect. Once we had enough money in that we could have the resources on a continued basis. I'd say the prescribed fireplace is a place that has been, I mean, I have like pulled out my hair. I'm not wearing a wig, but it feels like I have no hair left because we had no one trained to do it. And we ourselves had to get through sort of building that social license to do it. And we're still sort of more at that ratchet level on prescribed fire. And we have a lot to learn, but we're making huge progress there. Yeah, and I'll say it helps. I'm going to say this. The place where we are the weakest is where there's no infrastructure in our state. And that's the central part of our state where there's not a mill in sight. And it's about a 5-hour drive to get to a mill, and the transportation cost doesn't, basically consumes all the money you would have made even from a small diameter. And this is why we need the environmental community and the industry, milling and timber, to come together at a bigger pace and scale. Because we're starting, I got 2 mills closing just this year out on the peninsula, which is one of the areas, federal lands where we have a forest health crisis, more fires. And the more those mills go under, the more we're back to having the problem we had where it's not going to pay for itself and you're not going to have the critical infrastructure jobs.
Thanks for the question. We've decided to press our luck and allow them to kick us out. So we have time for questions. Are there any other questions from the audience today? Oh, there we go. Oh, we have 2, so we'll definitely get to both.
Hi, this question is for Alex. So you talked about how you worked on the Replant Act actually getting incorporated into IIJA. And I know that we joked about, we would love for there to be a piece of legislation that just go do natural climate solutions. But I'd love to hear, even if, let's just put reality aside, politics aside for a second, what is the benefit of having natural climate solutions kind of integrated into legislation already, versus doing something that's kind of a standalone that could potentially maybe be more ambitious for natural climate solutions? And I say putting politics aside because, probably one is a little bit more favorable, but from your perspective, what would you choose? What would be your perspective on that?
Great question. It's kind of the sausage making question. So the way we a lot of times come at these things with an all of the above approach. I don't just work on one concept. I'm working on and thinking about several concepts at a time. And they can be rolled into one large piece of legislation, or they could be standalone bills. Sometimes they start as one big dream. So there are situations where you've got a 30-60 page bill. That's all on one. The trick is though making sure that each one of those strikes that balance that I was talking about that gets that bipartisan support. Because otherwise, what you're going to do is you can have a 60-page bill that has 4 or 5 pages in it that drives a really important segment of your stakeholder group absolutely crazy. And then that just sinks the whole piece. And so keeping the eye on the ball as you're working together with others to come up with these different concepts so that you can kind of mix and match. And you're also talking to different members who are interested in different segments or things that things do, fire or dairy or crop or, something on the blue carbon on the coast. you can put all those in a package, but each one of them has to be equally viable, so they don't drag down the rest.
And one thing about the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act is actually what Alex is describing happened in lots of different issues. There were lots of different bills that were floating around in building energy efficiency or transportation or electrification. It all just kind of got sucked up into it. And a lot of that's the members' prerogatives. It's, you know, are they willing to let go of this piece of their bill because they can get this bigger thing? So, you know, it's a little bit of chemistry. You try to find the right balance of stuff to mix in the beaker. Any other comments on the panel about sort of the coalition building or other parts of the question about how this came about? We have another question up here, and then we might, I don't know, depends on how much we want to press it, but I'm okay. I don't have anything to throw. So, but please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
This might be a simple question or a hard one, I'm not sure, but I work with Land Trust, which is a pretty small part of the broader set of solutions here, but it's an important one. It's also an expensive one, which are permanently affecting farm, forest, or natural lands, create the foundation for doing this work. And I find that if I talk to land trusts, they say, well, if the magic button to push to go do natural climate solutions could push, simple, we've seen money. So I guess the question is it money, or are there other, whether it's from private or public sources, is that what we need primarily in your perspective, or are there other enabling conditions that are as or more urgent?
Well, that's a good, it sounds like more of a complicated question, so I'll leave it to you.
I'll just start because I've got, there's a lot of innovation that's needed. There's a lot that we need to know how to do successfully on the land. I shouldn't be speaking about this because I'm not a farmer, but I do a lot of listening. And there's a lot that people want to be very comfortable about before they go forward and invest and change and make a lot of risks. So figuring out that balance and getting major conservancy, we take a lot of time on this. And we don't want to put something out there until we're really clear that the science is there. And then we take a lot of time innovating on the ground and trying things in different parts of the country. And then we start to roll things up into policy options. So that's one of the things.
Yeah, I concur with what yourself and Hillary. The biggest thing is we have to listen to each other, and nobody has all the answers. But by us all listening and working together, we can make it all work. You know, some of the climate practices, it might mean that farmers have to change equipment, and that's we have to make sure that farmers are financially sustainable first. And, it is their careers. So there has to be a lot of listening and willingness to understand each other. And that's how we can move forward.
I'll take it from a number of different things. I do think it's money. I'm just going to start, right? Okay, I'm going to start from the context of the most basic things that we know are good natural climate solutions, not complicated, whether, right, like we're new tested technology, whatever, which is forest, right? And we're what has happening in Washington State. It's taking money. Like I said, we're buying 100,000 acres. We bought this year alone to conserve, and that money came from the Inflation Reduction Act, and it's come from our Climate Commitment Act of Washington State. But for that money, we wouldn't be able to purchase it. It was a threat of conversion. We're now, and our goal is to keep on that pace and scale, hopefully over the next decade, if both money sources continue to come in. I think also the same is true like biochar. I mean, anybody who read about biochar would go, oh, like my team goes, God, can you go a week without talking about biochar? I love biochar, okay? This is like this amazing solution that prevents the state from burning down, but also creates new product that we can put in our ag lands, we can put in our urban areas for green infrastructure, we can put it out on our forest land. Cows, did you know this? Cows, when they eat biochar, reduces their methane by 30%. Like, it is such an amazing goal, right? But we don't have the ability to just go build large biochar facilities as it's a new technology coming back, right? So that 40 million from the Inflation Reduction Act, coupled with private money coming in through sort of that REC, because it's going to power 13,500 homes, right? That clean energy REC is now going to make it likely, but we've got to expand that because one of those facilities enough. You could do that with a number of other types of technology, and it's going to take money. I think the other context now for agriculture, especially, is part of, I would say, is the money side and the incentive, right? I do think that right now we're seeing it. So many of our farmers, whether it's high value like orchards and grapes, and even wheat, are struggling. They're struggling with a changing climate, and our seasons are now off, so that now we're competing with California. We didn't used to have to. We're also the price of wheat, for example, is falling at an unbelievable, and most are struggling to even keep up, but we still need that food source. If we're going to now ask them to move to a more sort of sustainable climate solution ag practice, we're going to have to incentivize and pay for the value. And I do agree with you, the technology piece to test a lot of that stuff.
Biochar is pretty cool. We've done briefings on it. Nathan, give you the last words.
Yeah, well, and I just want to kind of follow up on the question. Unfortunately, everything costs money, so that's always been part of it. But I think one of the things that Alex was talking about, we need to support the research too, and make sure that we're putting billions of dollars out there. It's actually having the intended effect. I think it's really encouraging that a lot of the things that have been passed through Congress have this in mind. So I think part of the Inflation Reduction Act is $300 million for, science on monitoring and verification. So that, that's exactly what we need to figure out if these practices are actually having the intended climate effect. A lot of the partnerships for climate smart commodities programs that are out there have big kind of data reporting and science woven into those as well. And we had a conversation. One of the things that USN4C does is sometimes brings together expert panels to sort of talk about issues where there's a little bit of divergence between our communities. And so we had a session on some of the agricultural practices. And one of the things that really came out of that is, you can't just do the research on university research plots. You need to be doing the research out in the real world, and actually having real farmers do it in real world situations. And I think that's one of the things that's been really savvy about a lot of these new policies, is really thinking about like how do we use these programs to not just encourage adoption of these practices, but to collect the data we need to then drive further adoption. So I think it's really great actually what's going on. So yeah, just speaking for USN4C, I want to thank everybody for coming today. I want to thank our panelists as well. It's just always an extreme privilege to be up here with such great and people doing such good things in this field. So thank you, and thank everybody for coming today.
Like for my people, that's the relationship. I'm gonna give this back. So I don't mind that it comes out. Thanks, Nathan, Alex, Michael, and Hillary. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. Maybe we can hang out for a little bit and have some post-panel conversations. I hope everyone has a great rest of your planet week. Thank you.